It was supposed to be a routine political roundtable, a weekly televised program titled In Justice We Trust, featuring rotating guests debating hot-button legal topics in front of a live studio audience. That night's theme was public confidence in the legal system, and the producers were confident the segment would follow the usual script: civil discourse, a few fiery sound bites, and maybe a tweetable quote or two. What they didn't expect was Pam Bondi, the show's special guest, to detonate a bomb in the middle of the broadcast. A former attorney general known for her sharp legal mind and fierce convictions, Pam had been relatively quiet in the media in recent months. But tonight, she stepped into the studio with something very different on her mind. As the host posed a question about declining trust in the judiciary, Pam leaned slightly forward, her voice calm but unmistakably loaded. "There's a reason people are losing faith," she said, "because in some cases, justice isn't just being delayed, it's being buried." The host chuckled nervously, tried to move on, but Pam didn't stop. She continued, stating that she had first-hand knowledge of a high-profile criminal case, one involving powerful individuals, that had been intentionally shut down by senior figures in the judicial system to protect internal corruption. The temperature in the studio shifted instantly. Viewers at home could feel it. The host, now visibly anxious, interjected, "Pam, I need to stop you there. This isn't verified, and we can't," but she cut him off. "I have documents, I have transcripts, I have names, and the public deserves to know what's been hidden from them." The segment derailed in real time. Producers scrambled off camera, whispering into earpieces. The live feed stayed up, the screen now split awkwardly between Pam's resolute expression and the host's tight-lipped discomfort. Social media erupted within minutes. Viewers began clipping the footage, sharing it across platforms with captions like, "Pam Bondi just blew the lid off something huge," and "This wasn't supposed to air, but it did." The moment didn't just go viral, it exploded. But before the dust could settle, the blowback hit hard and fast. Within 24 hours, the Public Conduct Oversight Commission, a bureaucratic agency responsible for monitoring ethical behavior of officials and licensed attorneys, announced an unprecedented fine, $50,000, 0 cents, levied against Pam Bondi for recklessly disclosing privileged investigative information and disrupting public order through unapproved statements made on live broadcast. The language of the citation was vague, but the intention was unmistakable. She had stepped over a line they never wanted anyone to cross, and now she would pay the price. The announcement dominated headlines. "Pam Bondi fined after live TV outburst," read one. Another posed, "Hero or reckless firebrand." Legal pundits lined up to analyze the ruling. Some defended the commission's move, calling it necessary to preserve investigative integrity. Others saw it for what it truly was, an act of institutional punishment against someone who dared to say too much. Meanwhile, Pam refused to apologize. In a brief public statement, she doubled down. Truth is not misconduct, and transparency is not a violation. If telling the public what's been hidden costs $50,000, 0 cents, then that's a small price to pay for what's right. The story divided the nation, rattled the establishment, and signaled the beginning of a firestorm that neither the commission, nor the judiciary, nor the media could contain. Pam Bondi did not pay the fine. She didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't backpedal. Instead, she did what most didn't expect. She doubled down. Less than 48 hours after the Public Conduct Oversight Commission's announcement, Pam held a press conference on the steps of the State Judicial Hall, surrounded by cameras, reporters, and a small crowd of both critics and supporters. Dressed in black with no notes in hand, she stood before the microphones and said, calmly but firmly, "Let me be absolutely clear, this is not a matter of professional decorum. This is a matter of truth. What you witnessed on live television was not a lapse in judgment. It was the exposure of a cover-up. And this $50,000 0 cents fine, it's not a punishment for misconduct, it's a warning designed to silence." The crowd stirred and flashbulbs lit the podium like fireworks. She paused, her eyes scanning the reporters. "I will not pay a single cent for telling the truth, and I will not be the last one they try to make an example of. So let me say this directly. If the cost of honesty is persecution, then we've already lost the system we claim to defend." Her words sent shockwaves through the legal and political establishment. Within hours, lawmakers and media outlets took sides. A coalition of congressional figures issued a joint statement defending the commission's actions, calling Pam a destabilizing figure who exploits public trust for personal agendas. One senator even said Bondi's behavior was reckless. She jeopardized public confidence in our institutions and undermined ongoing investigation. But their words, while forceful, felt like rehearsed damage control. And the public knew it. Social media buzzed with sharp reactions. The hashtag #StandWithPam and "Truth is not a crime" began trending. Meanwhile, legal scholars quietly admitted off the record that the commission had likely overstepped their authority, entering the gray area of constitutional violation. Pam didn't stop at defiance. She went on the offensive. The next morning, she filed a federal appeal, challenging not only the legality of the fine, but the very existence of the regulation used to impose it. Her legal team submitted a 42-page brief to the U.S. District Court, arguing that the Commission's action had violated her First Amendment rights and that their enforcement mechanism lacked transparency, precedent, and judicial review. The brief cited multiple cases where whistleblowers had been protected, not punished. It didn't just argue that Pam had the right to speak. It argued that silencing her set a dangerous precedent that threatened the foundation of democratic accountability. The court accepted the appeal for review. From that moment on, the case transformed. What began as a fine levied against a single attorney became a national legal flashpoint, igniting debates in law schools, university lecture halls, political roundtables, and newsrooms. Television commentators asked, if Bondi can be fined for speaking on live TV, who's next? Think tanks released policy papers. Activists gathered outside government buildings holding banners that read, "You can't find the truth." The tension escalated into something more than political. It became existential. The question wasn't just whether Pam was right or wrong. It was whether the system could tolerate someone challenging its silence with facts. But not everyone was on her side. Conservative news outlets began running hit pieces, resurfacing old interviews and misrepresenting her words to paint her as erratic and unstable. Anonymous sources whispered that she was trying to build a media career off chaos. Meanwhile, institutions that once welcomed her quietly removed her name from guest panels and advisory boards. Speaking engagements were canceled. A law school that had scheduled her for a guest lecture weeks in advance suddenly withdrew its invitation, citing a need to maintain neutrality in an active legal matter. Still, she did not waver. When asked by a reporter if she regretted going public, Pam answered with just one sentence: "Regret is for the guilty. I only regret not speaking sooner." That quote hit the front page of major newspapers and was printed on posters, t-shirts, even tattooed by one supporter. She wasn't just fighting a legal battle anymore. She had become a symbol, and symbols, once awakened, are hard to silence. Yet beneath the momentum, the stakes remained daunting. The federal court's acceptance of the case was only the beginning. The actual ruling could take weeks, even months. In the meantime, the $50,000 0 cents fine still stood, and the commission hinted at the possibility of further disciplinary action, including a review of her license to practice law. Critics hoped she would tire, lose steam, or make a misstep. But Pam Bondi didn't blink. What the system failed to understand was that it had already lost the moment it tried to punish someone for speaking truth. Now, the courtroom wasn't just a place for hearings. It had become a battlefield for public trust. And as Pam stood in the middle of it, surrounded by both enemies and believers, she carried the one thing they couldn't regulate, fine or erase: conviction. The initial wave of support for Pam Bondi had been loud, powerful, and swift, but in the days that followed her federal appeal, something colder, more calculated began to creep in. One by one, major media outlets started removing her interviews, statements, and even name from their platforms. Entire segments were taken down with no explanation. Links once widely shared now led to 404 page not found errors. The video of her live television appearance, the one that started everything, was removed from multiple streaming platforms simultaneously. No official takedown notice, no copyright strike, just gone. Search engines stopped autofilling her name. Even typing Pam Bondi plus fine yielded older articles, as if the controversy had never happened. To many watching closely, it felt like more than coincidence, it felt like systemic erasure. And then came the shift on social media. What had once been a rallying cry, "Stand with Pam, truth is not a crime," began to fade, drowned beneath a wave of skepticism, cynicism, and subtle manipulation. Influential accounts that had previously championed her cause either fell silent or began walking back their support. "Maybe she should have followed proper channels," one former ally tweeted. "Telling the truth doesn't mean you can do it recklessly," posted another. A growing chorus of voices accused her of grandstanding or using the legal system to boost her profile. She was labeled a media opportunist, a self-styled martyr. Anonymous accounts flooded comment sections with coordinated smears, spinning her case as a publicity stunt or even a fabricated drama to deflect from real issues. The narrative was no longer hers to control. Pam, once a daily presence on political panels and public forums, found herself locked out of the very media ecosystem that had once embraced her. Behind closed doors, producers cited pressure from legal departments and advisories from regulatory bodies. For 3 weeks straight, she received rejections from every major talk show and interview platform, some that had already booked her. Even when her legal team offered to provide pre-approved statements, the doors remained closed. It wasn't an official blacklist. That would be too obvious. It was something quieter, softer, more dangerous. A slow-motion cancellation disguised as editorial discretion. Friends in journalism stopped returning her calls. Colleagues in law firms, many of whom had privately expressed admiration, now offered only vague condolences and cautious silence. Invitations to legal symposiums disappeared. She was no longer just under scrutiny, she had become untouchable. The silence wasn't just external, it seeped inward. Pam found herself staring at blank screens, inboxes filled with regret to inform you messages, and a phone that rarely rang anymore. Even walking into coffee shops felt different. Whispers behind her back, eyes that avoided hers. At night, the city felt colder, more distant. The very public she had spoken for seemed to be shrinking away. In a single month, she had gone from voice of defiance to ghost of controversy. She sat alone in her apartment one evening, watching the news anchors speak about ethics reform without mentioning her name once. Her photo had been removed from a story about legal transparency she had helped ignite. Her face, her voice, her presence was being written out of the story she risked everything to tell. And in that suffocating quiet, for the first time, doubt crept in. Not doubt about what she said, not about the truth, but whether the truth had a place in a system that could so efficiently erase the person who spoke it. Still, Pam didn't break. She didn't cry for the cameras, but she felt the weight, the loneliness, the bitter irony that telling the truth had made her invisible. She had expected opposition, but she hadn't expected erasure. And yet she still believed something was coming, something bigger than her, a reckoning. But as the walls closed in and the silence grew deeper, even Pam began to wonder whether the truth alone would be enough. Just when it seemed Pam Bondi had been completely boxed out, her voice muted, her image erased, her presence vanished, a flicker of light appeared. A young, independent, investigative journalist named Maya Tran reached out through a secure channel. Known for exposing corporate corruption and whistleblower suppression, Maya had built a reputation for integrity in a field riddled with compromise. She told Pam, "I believe you. I've been tracking the case you referenced on live TV. I found sealed documents, pressure trails, people who've disappeared quietly. You're not wrong. You were just early." Pam didn't dare hope, but something stirred in her, a quiet acknowledgement that perhaps the truth hadn't been buried for good. Over the course of 2 weeks, Maya worked tirelessly, verifying sources, double and triple checking files. The result was a bombshell, a full exposé detailing how the case Pam had referenced had been suppressed through interagency collusion, judicial intimidation, and manipulated evidence records. It included anonymous testimonies from 2 former investigators and digital receipts that traced interference back to several senior officials. The report was precise, documented, and devastating. It went live at 9:03 a.m. on a Monday. By 10:48 a.m. it was gone. The article, titled "The Case They Tried to Erase," was removed from its hosting platform with a vague notification: "Content violates national security protocols and contains unauthorized classified references." Social media links redirected to blank pages. The cached version was corrupted. Maya's account was locked without explanation, and her email host disabled her credentials. Within hours, mainstream outlets began publishing rebuttals and discrediting the source, even though they hadn't seen the article. Anonymous officials were quoted as calling it reckless journalism bordering on foreign interference. In a span of 120 minutes, what could have been a turning point was buried deeper than the story itself. Pam, though not surprised, was still stunned by the speed. The machine wasn't just suppressing information, it was actively vaporizing it. Maya went dark, texting only a single word before disappearing: "Sorry." No follow-up, no confirmation of safety, just silence. Again, and then it turned. Pam received an official notice from the State Bar's Ethics Committee informing her that her license to practice law was now under formal review. The letter cited her continued use of unsubstantiated claims in public forums and potential breach of client confidentiality, a technical reach that barely masked the punitive intent behind it. She had no open cases, no complaints from clients, no ethical violations on record, but the review process meant one thing: they were coming after her professionally, not just publicly. Days later, a separate message arrived, anonymous, untraceable, but undeniably threatening. It included screenshots of personal messages, old family photos, and even excerpts from private health documents, accompanied by a warning. "If you keep pushing, we keep publishing. You were warned." Pam stared at the screen, her hands frozen over the keyboard. They weren't just targeting her career, they were reaching into her past, into her private life, ready to dismantle her entirely. This was no longer about a fine or a statement. This was a war of erasure, designed to crush her spirit, not just her presence. In public, she stayed calm. In private, she started checking under her car before driving. Her email was moved to encrypted servers. She took meetings face-to-face, or not at all. The silence surrounding her deepened, not from fear, but fatigue. Even her supporters were weary. A few sent private words of encouragement, but they no longer dared say her name in public. She had become a cautionary tale, an uncomfortable reminder of what could happen when you told the truth in the wrong place, at the wrong time, to the wrong people. The audience watching from the outside felt it too. The buzz that once accompanied her story faded into a dull ache of resignation. Comment sections turned cold. Forums discussing her case dried up. Pam wasn't trending anymore. She was lingering, a ghost in the feed, an echo of a battle that people had stopped believing they could win. And still, deep down, something in her refused to die. The system had pushed her to the edge, discredited her, and attempted to dismantle everything she had worked for. But she knew this wasn't the end. Because somewhere, someone still had the truth, and if the truth existed, it could surface again. When everything seemed irreversibly lost, when Pam Bondi had been silenced, discredited, and all but erased from public discourse, a new message arrived. This time, it didn't come with a press badge or official seal. It was anonymous, unsigned, and marked only with the subject line, "Listen before they erase this too." The message was sent simultaneously to 3 mid-size independent news outlets, each known for resisting pressure from government and corporate interests. Attached was a single audio file, time-stamped and labeled "Commission Meeting. Internal Only." What followed was a recording of a closed-door session inside the Public Conduct Oversight Commission, the very body that had fined Pam $50,000, 0 cents. The voices were clear, unmistakable, and damning. About 12 minutes into the recording, a male voice, later matched to a senior ethics officer, said the words that would ignite the country. "Look, we didn't fine Bondi because she broke protocol. She didn't. We fined her because she knows too much. If she keeps talking, she's going to bring half the house down." Another voice, a woman's, responded, "Then make it hurt. The fine's just the start." The room in the recording chuckled. No editing, no commentary, just the raw, unfiltered truth. At first, the platforms hesitated. The outlets that received the leak debated publishing it. One backed out, but Maya Tran, the same independent journalist who had vanished after her first exposé was pulled, reappeared without warning. Her face looked tired, her voice trembled slightly, but she went live on her backup channel, one that had fewer than 10,000 followers at the time, and said 5 words. "This time I brought backup." And then she played the entire recording, no cuts, no pauses, just streamed it out to the world. Within an hour, the clip had 1.2 million views. Within 6, it had passed 10 million, spreading across social media faster than any platform could contain. The hashtags returned. Bondi was right. Unmask the commission and truth leaks. People weren't just listening, they were furious. What followed was a media cascade. News outlets that had previously avoided the story could no longer ignore it. The credibility of the recording was confirmed by audio forensics. Voice print analysis verified the speakers. Every sentence was time-stamped, authenticated, and broadcast on primetime television. Commentators who had once cast doubt on Pam's intentions now issued on-air apologies. The few officials who dared speak in defense of the commission were shouted down by both viewers and fellow panelists. The lie had unraveled in a single night, and in its place stood the vindication Pam had fought months to find. But the revelations didn't stop there. A second anonymous figure came forward. Identifying only as a former investigator with access to classified documentation, they released a sworn statement affirming that Pam had not only told the truth in her original broadcast, but had, in fact, withheld even more damaging details to protect ongoing investigations. The whistleblower revealed that Pam had attended a closed internal hearing as a legal observer, where she had witnessed testimony related to judicial interference and evidence manipulation in a major criminal case, the same case she'd referenced on air, the same one she was fined for bringing up. Everything connected. The dots weren't just forming, they were glowing. And then, at last, Pam Bondi reappeared. She hadn't spoken publicly in over a month, but now, standing at a podium during a surprise public town hall, packed with supporters, reporters, and flashing cameras, she looked unshaken. Gone was the woman who had been erased. In her place stood a fighter sharpened by silence and shaped by fire. She didn't open with pleasantries. She didn't offer measured words. She looked straight into the lens of the camera, as if staring down every institution that tried to break her, and said, "If telling the truth costs $50,000, 0 cents, then I'll pay it. And I'll keep paying it, because what we just heard isn't just corruption, it's fear. Fear of sunlight, fear of exposure, fear of people like me. But guess what? I'm still here, and I'm not leaving." She paused. The room held its breath. "You thought a fine could silence me? You thought a smear could undo me? You should have fined me more. You should have come harder, because I'm not here to beg for my name back. I'm here to make sure the next person like me doesn't have to fight this fight alone." The crowd erupted, reporters clapped, legal experts cried. Across the country, live streams played her speech in coffee shops, classrooms, and offices. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been silenced for speaking too soon, too loudly, or too truthfully. That night, social media didn't just trend, it transformed. Artists painted murals of Pam with the words "Truth doesn't apologize." Activists planned marches. Civil liberties groups called for congressional inquiries. A major law firm offered pro bono representation for anyone else targeted for speaking out. And deep inside the commission building, panic set in. Calls were leaked, meetings were canceled, staffers quit, and one anonymous source inside the agency confirmed what the public had already suspected. More tapes existed, more voices, more evidence. The investigation was just beginning. Pam Bondi had gone from being erased to becoming the spark of a national reckoning. And this time, the system wouldn't silence her. The momentum that had been building behind Pam Bondi's vindication finally crashed into the very institution that had tried to bury her. In the days following the explosive release of the commission's audio recording, A whistleblower from within leaked a trove of internal emails, and the contents were more damning than anyone could have predicted. These messages, stretching back months before the fine was ever announced, detailed a concerted effort by key figures within the Public Conduct Oversight Commission to neutralize Bondi as a rising threat to institutional confidence. One email, from a senior advisor to the commission's chairperson, read, "If we don't move now, she'll dig deeper and turn this into a witch hunt against the bench. We need to frame it as disorderly behavior, not retaliation." Another message suggested coordinating quietly with media contacts to contain the narrative before it spreads. The leaks didn't just confirm political motivation. They exposed an elaborate campaign of suppression, manipulation, and damage control, orchestrated at the highest levels of a supposedly neutral ethics body. Public outrage reached a boiling point. Demands for accountability echoed across platforms, newsrooms, and state houses. Hashtags evolved from support into action. Demand the commission, accountability now, and no one above truth. Protesters gathered outside the commission's headquarters in multiple cities, carrying enlarged prints of the leaked emails, some with bold red letters stamped across, "You got caught." Legal organizations condemned the commission's actions as a gross violation of due process and ethical independence. Former allies distanced themselves. Political leaders who once defended the fine now backtracked under pressure, issuing carefully worded statements about the need for transparency in oversight bodies. But none of it stopped what came next. Faced with unrelenting pressure and a wave of resignations across the lower ranks, the chairperson of the commission, Judge Lionel Grayson, announced his resignation in a brief, shaky press conference. His words were thin, emotionless, robotic. "In light of recent developments and in the interests of restoring public trust, I am stepping down, effective immediately." He did not take questions, he did not apologize, but it was too late for graceful exits. Within 48 hours, 3 other senior members were placed under formal investigation and immediately suspended from their positions. An emergency ethics review panel, composed of outside legal experts, was convened to audit the commission's actions over the past 5 years. There were whispers that this was only the beginning. Anonymous tips now flowed into investigative reporters and watchdog groups, suggesting that Pam Bondi's case was just one of many where the commission had used its power to punish dissent, protect internal corruption, or suppress inconvenient truths. The collapse wasn't just administrative, it was symbolic. For years, the commission had operated behind closed doors, cloaked in legal jargon and bureaucratic procedure. Now, its inner workings were laid bare for all to see, and what the public saw was not justice, it was control masquerading as integrity. The same system that had tried to crush one voice had imploded under the weight of its own lies. As the news unfolded, clips of Pam's speech, her refusal to pay the fine, her declaration that truth wasn't for sale, resurfaced with renewed force. Commentators, who had once doubted her, now called her the woman who brought down a giant. Students chanted her words at rallies. The country watched, not with fear or cynicism, but with something that had been absent for far too long. Pam didn't gloat. She didn't launch a victory tour, but in her silence, there was satisfaction. The house that tried to break her was now rubble, and the people who built it were finally answering to the law they once used to intimidate others. The ruling came on a clear morning, almost surreal in its quietness. After months of turmoil, silence, exposure, collapse, and resilience, the U.S. federal court issued its decision in bold, definitive language. Pam Bondi was found not guilty of any professional misconduct. The $50,000 0-cents fine levied against her was officially overturned, and the commission that had issued it was deemed to have acted with clear political motivation and disregard for constitutional protections. The court didn't stop at absolution. In a powerful statement, the judge ordered a public reinstatement of Pam's professional standing, citing irreparable reputational damage inflicted through deliberate institutional abuse. Furthermore, the court mandated a formal public acknowledgement of the wrongful disciplinary action, essentially a legal restoration of truth. The decision sent a message not just to Bondi, but to every institution that had tried to silence her. You lost. That same evening, Pam appeared on national television not as a defendant, not as a scapegoat, but as a symbol of unshaken integrity. The interview was calm, respectful, and broadcast live across all major networks. For the first time, the screen beneath her name didn't read "controversial lawyer" or "facing investigation." It simply said, "Pam Bondi, the woman who would not be silenced." Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened when the anchor asked how it felt to win after being so thoroughly erased. "I didn't win," she replied softly. "The truth did, and I was lucky enough to carry it through the fire." In that moment, Pam wasn't just a guest on a talk show. She was a turning point in the national conscience. Her words echoed beyond the broadcast, clipped into millions of social media shares, printed on banners, and even carved into courthouse walls by law students who saw in her a modern-day emblem of moral courage. But her story didn't end with vindication. It sparked transformation. Within 2 weeks of the ruling, a bipartisan group of lawmakers introduced the Public Integrity and Transparency in Communication Act, quickly dubbed by the public as the Bondi Bill. The proposed law aimed to protect legal professionals, investigators, and government employees from punitive action when speaking out about corruption or misconduct, so long as their claims were grounded in fact and public interest. It also called for greater oversight of regulatory commissions, mandating transparency in their disciplinary decisions and introducing third-party review requirements. The legislation had momentum, and it had a face. One senator stated on the floor, "If what happened to Pam Bondi can happen to someone with her strength, it can happen to anyone. And that's why we need this bill, not just to honor her, but to protect the truth itself." Across the country, the ripple effects were immediate. Over 250,000 people signed a national petition demanding a full review of all similar disciplinary actions carried out by the now discredited commission in the past decade. Whistleblower protection hotlines reported a spike in calls. Law schools held panels titled "The Bondi Effect: Truth in the Face of Power." Professors rewrote syllabi to include her case as a landmark in modern legal ethics. One student wrote in an open letter, "For every young woman in law school afraid to speak her mind, Pam Bondi gave us a new model of courage. Not polished, not perfect, but real." Major publications that had once cast doubt on her intentions now ran editorial pieces titled, "She Was Right." Meanwhile, Pam continued her work quietly, purposefully. She didn't bask in the spotlight or launch a foundation bearing her name. Instead, she created a nonprofit legal defense fund for professionals facing retaliation for ethical whistleblowing. The first 2 cases funded by her initiative involved a public defender in Chicago and a forensic analyst in Florida, both previously silenced, now given voice. When asked by a reporter why she didn't take a political office or capitalize on her fame, Pam replied, "Because this was never about a career, it was about the cost of silence and making sure no one else has to pay it alone." As weeks turned into months, the heat of the headlines cooled, but the Bondi legacy remained. Etched into legislation, education, and culture, her name became shorthand not for controversy, but for conviction. Murals went up in law schools. A university renamed its annual Public Ethics Award in her honor. And most importantly, conversations about truth, speech, and justice became louder, bolder, and harder to suppress. In the end, Pam Bondi didn't just reclaim her name. She reignited a national belief that the truth, no matter how buried, can still rise, still roar, and still win. And as the public watched her walk back into the world not as a victim, but as a force, they didn't see a woman who fought for herself. They saw a woman who fought for all of them. Justice at last had found its voice.